I'm actually interested to hear the takes on this one.
Yeah, Rogue One. All right. So depending on who you are, either one of the best or the best of the Disney era of Lucasfilm. Very exciting. It is definitely a espionage / warish film, even though they're all like war movies, but this is
And I might add, they had the best CGI out of all the Disney films.
True. Yep. K2SO was a believable robot, even though it was just Pirate Steve, In any event, so here we go. Ready? Screen share. All right, we got our good old Safari sheet here. If anybody wants the link, should I share it in the chat? Everybody know where it is or not? You know what? I'm just going to share it in the chat, and you can either click on it or not, or you can just follow along with me.
Yeah, I couldn't find it in the event, so I'm not sure if I'm just not seeing it. But
that could have been my fault.
No, sometimes Facebook events work oddly, so
it should be, and if not, whatever. Well, it's here now. Okay. Alrighty. So here we go. Source sheet, Rogue One. We have the very first scene, or one of the first scenes, but we have I forget the world they're on, but it's Lyra and Galen Erso are on whichever world it is. I should know. I'm sorry, I forgot. I read the novel so long ago. But Lyra says to Jin, you know where to go, don't you? Trust the Force. So as far as like trusting the Force and using Force as a stand-in for God, like we talked for A New Hope, and which, I'll say this, but I think a broader message about this movie. But we have B'tach el Hashem b'chol libecha, trust in the Lord with all your heart, which is really fascinating because the second part of this verse is actually funny because it's Ve'al binascha al tishayin, which is, and don't rely on your own understanding. Although it's kind of funny when you think about that, because oftentimes in Star Wars, and certainly here with Lyra talking to Jin, it's really about they're not at cross purposes. Really, sort of trusting in the Force kind of is both trusting in God, but also sort of that inner intuition as a sort. So that's actually kind of funny. I thought this was an amusing verse because it has both the first part of the verse is exactly word, like really, like what Lyra is saying, but at the same time, there's also an intuitional aspect, I think, with Star Wars when it comes to the Force. I will say, so here's my broader thing I'm going to share about Star Wars. When it comes to A New Hope, which is our very first session we talked about with episode 4, hope is a huge thing. It's obviously called A New Hope, but hope is a really huge theme throughout the movie. And this movie is really the movie that comes closest to that as talking about hope. Hope keeps popping up throughout this movie as a leitmotif. And certainly here we have, well, actually, this isn't really so much about hope. Trust the Force. We're going to see hope popping up later on, and certainly at the end of the movie with Princess Leia. But hope is a really big piece of this, and hope is good. I mean, it's a good thing. It's sort of, it's in our tradition, and to some degree, it's oftentimes more in the background than necessarily foregrounded. But I just thought I'd throw that out there. All right, Extremist Rebels. So Jyn Erso is brought to Yavin 4. Jyn Erso says, "You're all rebels, aren't you? Like, why? Like, what's this deal with Saw Gerrera?" Mon Mothma says, "Yes, but Saw Gerrera is an extremist. He's been fighting on his own since he broke with the rebellion. His militancy has caused the Alliance a great many problems. We have no choice now but to try to mend that broken trust." Now, for this text I took from Babylonian Talmud, Gittin 56a, and this is a story recounting, this is recounting back in the end of the Second Temple time, so the mid-ish 1st century of the Common Era, and it talks about there were certain zealots among the people of Jerusalem, and the sages said to them, "Let's go out and make peace with the Romans," but they did not allow them. They said, "Let's go out and engage in battle against the Romans." And the sages said to them, "You will not be successful." They arose and burned down the storehouses of wheat and barley, and there was a famine. So this is the connection here is that there are in any sort of rebellion, you'll have extremists in this rebellion. And here you have both this sort of rebellion in the middle of first century regarding Jerusalem, and versus the sages who were not as extremist, right? Not as zealous in their militancy. And we kind of see that with Saw Gerrera. His band, even though it's not really all that clear in Rogue One, it's really the end of Saw Gerrera's time. If you really want to get into it, like, you can see a little bit of Saw Gerrera's rebels and their militancy, a little bit in Star Wars Rebels. You also get a taste of it if anybody's read Leia, Princess of Alderaan, that book. You get a sense of it. But fascinating little connection there. Any questions so far?
I was just going to say quick, they also bring in a touch of it in the Force Awakens video game. There's a part that overlaps when you're with Saw and some of the rebels.
Yes.
And he ends up taking a little more extremist path on something and ends up leaving. Right? And then like some people hang out and like, yeah, I don't remember exactly how it went.
I think it was the second one.
Yeah. But they're on Kashyyyk. So it's definitely on Kashyyyk, and it's, again, you see him like he's willing to go farther and kind of do things, or, you know, cut his losses and leave people behind because the fight is more important. And then some of the people under him didn't quite agree with that and they stick around or whatever. But just real quick touch.
Cool. Good to hear. Gaming is definitely not an area of my Star Wars knowledge, so that's helpful. That's good. All right, trust. Okay, so I really want to put this in, even though I didn't have a corresponding biblical or rabbinic text. Cassian Andor says, asking about where Jyn Erso got this gun, and he says, that's not the point. Where did you get it? I found it. And then, of course, we have this classic line from K2SO. I find that answer vague and unconvincing. But then Jyn says, trust goes both ways. I didn't really have a good, unless someone has a good trust goes both ways, especially a rabbinic text, be great. Although I just didn't have something, but it was just too good of a line not to include, even though I didn't have a good corresponding biblical or rabbinic text. We have this great Saw Gerrera line, lies, deceptions. Let's see it, Bodhi, that lies, deceptions. And then, then eventually says, the very end, lies, would I risk everything for a lie? No, we don't have time for this. Basically, every day more lies. Saw Gerrera is just really distrustful of Bodhi Rook. And then, of course, he says, why would I risk everything for a lie? No. So I found this really interesting text from the very beginning of the 9th chapter of Jeremiah, of Sefer Yirmiyahu. So it starts out to be in the desert, just like they're on the planet of Jeddah, and they are basically kind of in a desert, and they're kind of like their own little encampment, a band of rogues. I love that. And then really, verse 3 is really where it's interesting. Beware every man of his friend, trust not even a brother, for every brother takes advantage. And then you even have in verse 4, one man cheats the other, they will not speak truth. Basically, like, this is like a great background for Saw Gerrera having such a huge distrust of not just here Bodhi Rook, but really even other rebels, right? He's distrustful of the mainstream rebels, right? Even if he can trust everybody in his camp, like Two Tubes or the other folks, but he doesn't trust like Mon Mothma or the other people at Yavin 4. So I found that verse, or even that collection of verses at the very beginning of the 9th chapter of Jeremiah, to be like strangely fitting for Saw Gerrera's like huge mistrust of even his fellow rebels. Any thoughts? All right, cool. I just thought I'd share that one. That was a nice, fun little find. All right, Hope. So Jyn Erso says when they're in Ni Jeddah in the holy city, Jyn Erso said, Cassian says something about hope, and she says, hope? He says, yeah, rebellions are built on hope. Now, I'm trying to think about rebellions being built on hope, and it does very much sound that it is actually the case. One example I was thinking about, you could really find, I suppose, a lot of different rebellions, even just within biblical literature, and one that came up recently was the Korach rebellion of really, it's Korach, and he has 250 other like senior leaders joining with him, and the rebellion against Moses and Aaron. They say, how come you have the leadership of Bnei Israel, the Israelites? Like, why'd you lift yourselves up above everybody? Clearly, Korach and his merry band of I don't know, similarly minded folks thought that they could have hope to ascend to their own sense of leadership, right? And like not have Moses and Aaron lording it over to them, but that they would have really a say in the direction of the Bnei Israel, the Israelite people. So that's one example in the book of Numbers that came to my mind. Other rebellions, whether biblical or rabbinic elsewhere, I mean, it makes sense. There's always a sense of, in any rebellion, you are hopeful for change and you want it to be different, which is a good piece. Thoughts, feedback? All right, rolling right along. Okay, I didn't have anything for this. This was just a cool line. Chirit Imwe, like really the first time we hear Chirit Imwe talking, he says, may the force of others be with you. May the force of others be with you. Now, it's interesting. I'm just going to go a little in the Star Wars direction, which is, this is one of the earliest lines he says, and this is a thing of his, may the force of others be with you, even though for most of the rest of the movie, and I think what people think of him as, what they remember him saying is not this, but this is still an interesting one. But this is totally a biblical rabbinic a line that had no, as far as I know, biblical or rabbinic correspondence of may the force of others be with you, with the, sort of being one with another. I'll talk about that later, but for this, I didn't have any correspondence. Okay. Protectors of the temple. So Jin Urso asked Cassian Andor, who are those guys? Referring to Chirit Imwe and Beis Malus. And Cassian Andor says, the guardians of the wills, protectors of the Kyber temple, but there's nothing left to protect. So now they're just causing trouble for everybody. So as I was thinking about it, it makes sense. Temples need protectors. And I don't know how much people really consider, at least when it comes to in biblical and rabbinic sort of notions of protecting the temple. Clearly here when it comes to, and obviously there are so many connections when it comes to Jeddah, and specifically Jeddah, the capital city of Jeddah, which is sort of the holy city, right? You're walking through, I'm going to take it off screen share for a moment. Like you see these scenes, and I really could have popped this in, but it's the holy city, right? Jeddah, and you have all these religious pilgrims of all these different sorts of religious things or sects, and they're all in different garb. If you rewatch Rogue One, you'll see these differently dressed folks. And there really is a sense it's a holy city, and there is a temple, a huge temple in this holy city. And it clearly needs guarding. Now, for here, we definitely have a sense, to some degree, of weaponry that these guards possessed on them to really physically protect the temple. Of course, as Cassian Andor points out, Empire took over, displaced these guardians of the wills, these protectors of the temple, from doing their duty. So okay, so that works for Star Wars. What about ours? So in Numbers, we have some of, and these ones in the book of Numbers are really about the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Although these ones relating to the tabernacle later on, when the temple in Jerusalem gets built, these verses are essentially used for similar purposes of those who were to camp before the tabernacle in front, before the tent of meeting, but they were Moses and Aaron and his sons, attending to the duties. Any outsider who encroached was put to death, which is pretty intense, 18:2. The tribe of Levi, your ancestral tribe, to be attached to you and to minister to you while you and your sons under your charge are before the tent of the pact. And 4, you shall be attached to you and discharge the tent of the duties. No outsider shall intrude upon you. So these are sort of general guarding. Oh, actually, it's interesting. Okay, so the English in Numbers 18:4 doesn't really do it justice, because in the very first part of the verse, "V'nilvu alecha v'shamro et mishmeret ohel moed." So it's actually more about guarding. The language in the Hebrew is really more about guarding. So they're going to be accompanying you, and they will do the guard duty, which is something that is not there in the English. So I really want to point out there is that guarding language going on, and the rabbis formalize this. There are a lot of rabbinic texts about this. I'm just going to give you two quick, simple ones from the Mishnah. Now the Mishnah, first couple of centuries of the Common Era, and they're talking about how the arrangements were. So we have Mishnah Midot, 1:1, in 3 places the priests kept watch and keep watch of the temple in these different places, and the Levites in 21 places. So the priests have their certain watches, and the Levites also are around them. And 5 at the 5 gates of the Temple Mount, 4 as 4 corners, 5 at the 5 gates. Okay, so we have all these different places in Mishnah Tamid 1:1. Bishlo, again, we have a very similar one in different places the priests keep watch, and then it gets really specific about all this stuff and where they sleep and da-da-da-da-da. And we could get really deep into the weeds on that. But the basic idea is that the rabbis, starting with the biblical and then going through the Second Temple period, and even the rabbis recognize the necessity for keeping guard, for keeping watch, and they assign specifically the Kohanim and Levim as those working the guard duty. So, questions, comments, queries?
Rabbi Drew, on the
Yeah.
Numbers 18:4, where you said that the Hebrew is actually, more about guarding, does it also say like they shall be attached to you to do this? Because that's really interesting, because the two kind of attach themselves to the party.
Yeah.
And so they're like guarding the temple, but now they're going to go guard these people who are theoretically fighting for the force.
Right. So yeah, v'nilvu alecha, that they'll like accompany you, v'shamru, and they will guard et mishmer ohel moed, the guarding of the tent of meeting. So there really is that connecting the accompaniment and the guard duty aspect in that language.
Cool.
Which is discharge the duties. It's definitely vaguer, and you really don't understand what that is, but they're protecting it. Okay.
It also seems like the guard duty in the text, it seems to be elders or Aaron and Moses. Like, it's not just anybody. Like, the guardians have some kind of status or importance, it also seems like. And obviously, maybe they've sort of lost that in the Star Wars aspect, but maybe it was once there or whatever. So that was just something else I saw there that was neat.
Yeah, there could be different ages and stuff like that. I mean, it does say elsewhere in the Torah as far as who can, like the ages, basically like Kohanim and Levim. They're different numbers, but basically at 25, 30-ish, they start their service until 50, and then they hit retirement age. Although they can...
So very specific about you have to be these people and you have to be of this age.
Yep.
And that it's important, yeah.
Yeah, you can come back after 50 in kind of like a consultancy role as a Cohen consultant. You can sort of volunteer your time and expertise as an elderly consultant. But yeah, between basically 30 and 50. Technically, there's also like between 25 and 30 is kind of a ramping up age, but yeah.
So like an intern and a emeritus professor.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. All right. So we have the scene. Chirrut Imwe comes into this midst of stormtroopers, and he says, "The force is with me, and I fear nothing." And he's blind, right? Carrying a stick. He doesn't seem particularly offensive, or to be. If you were to do a threat assessment on a blind man with a stick, it would not be high, right? And he's surrounded by a bunch of stormtroopers with armor and guns. So here, when the force is with me and I fear nothing, something that came out to me was from Psalms 23. Gam kelech gates amaves lo irora ki atayim adi, though I walk through a valley of deepest darkness, or a gates amaves, or a valley of the shadow of death, I think is a more literal translation. I will not fear harm, for you are with me. And then really interesting, though, the rest of the verse is, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And he literally has a staff. And I was like, oh, I can't not use this. This is so good. So he basically is walking into a valley of the shadow of death. I mean, it'd be great if there were death troopers in the scene, but there are stormtroopers. So yeah, and clearly death will happen here, right? Even if, and you think it would be him or the stormtroopers committing it, ultimately I'm just gonna spoil this for you, but Baze Malbus shoots them down and they die. Okay? Spoiler alert. If you haven't seen this already 5 times. Okay. Blind. Okay, so I just want to throw this in. I want to do something about blindness. Of course, there's this really great scene where the Saw Gerrera rebels take the well, it's Saw, it's Baze, it's Chirrut, Baze, Cassian, and Jin, and they put the bag over Chirrut Imwe's head. He says, "Are you kidding me? I'm blind." I'm like, what's the point? I'm trying to cover my eyes. I don't have a good parallel for that, but the "I'm blind" piece. So I was thinking about this. There is this one particularly famous verse of Velifne iver lo titem mishol, so that in front of a blind person you should not place a stumbling block, which has it's not a direct parallel to this scene here in Rogue One, but I wanted to bring it up. We have a blind person. Now, I was thinking about using some rabbinic text when it comes to blind people and various things. There are certain I mean, for the most part, blind people do things. There are certain things that are, I guess, a little bit more problematic or challenging. Whether I was trying to use some of the text, I'm like, but they really don't relate to this. They're not that well connected. But blind people are part of reality. They're there, and certainly the rabbis deal with it. Here in this Leviticus 19, which is like the centralmost chapter in the 5 books of Moses, certainly in Leviticus, it's really chock full of really great stuff. You get some Shabbat stuff, you get Peah, you get a lot of good interpersonal things, but also some between man and God pieces as well. And this is a really great one, which is not insulting the deaf. Don't put a stumbling block before the blind, and I am the Lord. So, or you shall fear your God, I am the Lord. So this is some really good stuff, blind people. I do want to say we also hear another, it's funny because later on in the movie we have when the rebels are attacking the planet at the end, which I should remember these planets' names, and I feel like I should remember. But in any event, we have director.
Scarif.
What?
Scarif.
What?
Planet Scarif.
Yeah, Scarif. Thank you, Stevie. Oh, thank you for saving me. On Scarif. And then we have that great line, "Are you blind? Deploy the garrison," which is a phenomenal line of going on. But there, "Are you blind" is not as positively employed in that line. But I just wanted to talk about the blind piece. All right. So we have our protagonist locked up in jail. We have Chirrut, we have Baze, and we have Cassian Andor. And Chirrut Imwe is saying, "I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me." And basically over and over and over again, I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. And Baze, of course, says, "You pray, really?" But it's really funny because then Chirrut says it bothers him because he knows it's possible. Baze Malbus was once the most devoted guardian of them all, of us all. Of course, we really get that really funny addition of, I'm beginning to think the Force and I have different priorities from Cassian. Of course, one direction I was thinking of going of talking about oneness, I am one with the Force, is using Shema Yisrael from the book of Deuteronomy. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, basically pronouncing the oneness of God, which I think in Judaism is really like the statement par excellence, I've heard it called like the watchword of the Jewish faith or whatever. So Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. You sort of are pronouncing it. Okay, there's that unification, that oneness aspect, which I definitely could have thrown in here. I actually found this text, which I thought was interesting, from the Babylonian Talmud, Brachot 32b, which is, and you'll see why I threw this in, which is a nice little connection to the movie here, which is Rabbi Elazar said, since the day the temple was destroyed, the gates of prayer were locked, as it is said. And I do have to say, actually, before I go on, I don't want to take for granted that the rabbis believed in prayer and perhaps the efficacy of prayer. I didn't throw any text in here about that. I definitely could have. But prayer is big, certainly for rabbinic Judaism. It's huge. I picked out this specific one for this specific instance, though, and which is, so since the day of the temple was destroyed, the gates of prayer were locked, as it is said, though I plead and call out, he shuts out my prayer. And even though the gates of prayer were locked, the gates of tears were not locked, as it is stated, hear my prayer, Lord, and give ear to my pleading, keep not silence at my tears. So I thought this was like particularly pertinent because, you know, we talk about the destruction of the temple, and these were guardians of the temple, and their temple is sort of basically been destroyed, and as we're about to see in the movie, it's literally going through the process of active destruction at the moment. And it's also interesting in thinking about even just the imagery of being locked, because they are literally locked behind bars, right? And I just thought this was too good of a text, because between the destruction of the temple, which that was their life, and being locked and trying to seek prayer to get unlocked, I just thought was too good of a poetic connection here to ignore. But of course, as I mentioned, we have Shema as pronouncing the unity of, you know, God, and also, like I said, prayer at different points in time is huge for rabbinic Talmudic Judaism and on. Cool. Any thoughts, questions, comments, queries, all the good stuff?
I was going to even add in maybe with the tears.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in a way you can probably think that Bays is internally very deeply hurt by the destruction of the temple and the falling of the faith, and going from being most devoted now to being so cynical and everything, that they're, you know, not external tears, but there is definitely a deep wound and a hurt and a mourning there. And that, you know, while the school scenes are all, you know, like walking through all of these different battles and surviving and everything, Blaze is always there. And we see in the early battles, he's the one that actually takes care of the problem and keeps him alive too. And so it's almost like there's, you know, you have Chirit's prayer, and then you have the combination of Bays being there and his internal tears, and then they get the answer. They get we are able, through fortune, through the force or whatever, to survive and to make the objective and eliminate the threat. You know, so I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, they have a nice, interesting, you know, dynamic to their duo-ness. Yeah. Yeah. It kind of reminds, I mean, this is going on a like super tangent, but well, I can go on two different tangents, but like Bayes Malbus of either, if we want to stick to like just Talmudic Rabbinic Judaism, like we do see some certain figures who just like something happens and they just lose it. They just kind of go crazy. Whether it is Acher for some people, Acher, who was Rabbi Meir's teacher, and he just sort of goes off his own way. We also see it with, there's this in Chagiga, in the Babylonian Talmud of Chagiga, it talks about four who entered the Pardes. We have Rabbi Akiva, who was enriched, and he was like, he got even better. We also have Acher, who I just mentioned, and he sort of just went off to, he just sort of whatever. But then we also have Ben Zoma and Ben Azai. Ben Zoma, he just sort of, he kind of loses it. But then Ben Azai just like, it's not really, whatever. They all sort of are differently affected by whatever this Pardes thing is, or paradise, as it were. That's what one thing it kind of makes me think of, and totally differently, it has nothing to do with rabbinic Judaism, but I'm just going to throw it in here. But there are many Jews who experienced the Holocaust. They just like totally dumped the faith. They're like, this is it. Like God, Judaism, none of that helped us when we were at the mercy of the Nazis. And I'm done. Like I just can't even. So that's kind of what it makes me feel like Bay says, like we spent and devoted our entire lives to this. This is what we did as guardians of the wills, as protectors of the Khyber temple. And it just got taken away from us by the empire. And now we're just in the wind. We have nothing going our way. So yeah, really tough. Okay. All right, so factions. Okay. So we have this really tough scene on Yavin 4. Senator Vaspar, we joined an alliance, not a suicide pact. And Baylor Organa says, we've only now managed to gather our forces. And Senator Noor Jebel, and trust me, I didn't know their names either. Gather our forces. General Dravin's already blown up an imperial base. And General David Dravin, a decision needed to be made. Senator Tinra Pamlo, again, not a name I knew before this. If it's war you want, you'll fight alone. And Senator Vaspar, if that's the way it's going, why have an alliance at all? So, and then it's obviously very disheartening because you're rooting for Jyn Erso to like have them get their act together and then go off and attack Scarif and see what they could do. And it's obviously deeply disappointing. This factioning or splitting off, as you know, sort of that rebellion aspect and splitting off into factions made me think about. I found this text from the Jerusalem Talmud in Tani 24a. Jerusalem Talmud is finally making a cameo in today's session. Yay! We have, this goes back to the Bar Kokhba revolt, which happens in the first part of the 2nd century of the Common Era. And Rabbi Shimon, son of Yochai, so Rabbi Shimon, son of Yochai is in like the mid to late 2nd century of the Common Era. And so he teaches Akiva, my master, talking about Rabbi Akiva, would interpret the following verse. A star shall come forth out of Jacob, Kochav, and then Ziba shall come out of Jacob, or like instead of Derech Kochav, Derech Kochav Miyakov, Derech Kozba Miyakov. Okay, it's a little play, a similar sounding word. So when Rabbi Akiva saw Bar Kozba, he said, this is the king Messiah. Rabbi Yochanan, son of Torta, said to him, Akiva, grass will grow on your cheeks and the Messiah will not yet have come. Okay, that's not your man. This isn't the guy. So Rabbi Yochanan said, and this is a much later rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan was a 3rd century rabbi. He said there were 80,000 pairs of trumpeters that surrounded Beitar. Each one was in charge of a number of troops. Ben Kozba was there and he had 200,000 troops. Now, what's the relevance of all this? I kind of see this really here, especially playing out between Rabbi Akiva and this Rabbi Yochanan, son of Torta. And the idea is, yeah, Rabbi Akiva was gung-ho. He wanted to rally behind this Bar Kozba or Ben Kozba, however, I mean, it's seen as Ben Kozba, both Bar Kozba and Ben Kozba in this text. And it's, you kind of see that just like this deliberation, this debate here in Yavin 4 of, yes, let's go and fight versus no, let's not. This is a suicide pact, right? And so we see that playing out in this particular text from the Talmud Yerushalmi. Any questions? All right. And by the way, I do want to point out that in the Jerusalem Talmud, what happens ultimately is that Bar Kozba's forces get repelled, the Romans win, and a whole bunch of death comes upon the Jews and the rabbis, and it does not turn out well, right? And so in this instance, like Rabbi Yochanan, son of Torta here, probably stayed back on the sidelines, did not get involved, did not throw his support behind this Bar Kozba rebellion, and I don't know, could have been around, but that reminds me exactly of some of these senators or other folks involved in this conversation of like, this is just heading towards death. This is not looking anything successful. All right. Stuff. Okay, I just put this as stuff, which is I'm just gonna be personal here, which is this is my absolutely 100% favorite part of Rogue One. This line like literally had me in tears. But Cassian Andor says they were never going to believe you. I appreciate the support, and he says, but I do. I believe you. We'd like to volunteer. Some of us, most of us, we've done terrible things on behalf of the rebellion. We're spies, saboteurs, assassins. Everything I did for the rebellion. Every time I walked away from something I wanted to forget, I told myself it was for a cause that I believed in, a cause that was worth it. Without that, we're lost. Everything we've done would have been for nothing. I could not face myself if I gave up. Now, none of us could. It won't be comfortable, which I just loved because it gave such a personal, human perspective on the rebellion, as opposed to like, oh, they're rebellion. They're just like fighting against tyranny. But here it's like, they do lots of stuff. There's bombings. There's like, and they're not even the extremists like Saw Gerrera's folks. These are like the regular rebels, and they're like he says, like they're carrying out assassinations. They're doing a lot of dirty stuff. It doesn't sound as fancy as some might make it. So what I had to one text that just like popped into my mind. I'm open to hearing from others as far as better and perhaps more pertinent text. But one of the things in here in Cassian's statement was every time I walked away from something I wanted to forget, I told myself it was for a cause I believed in, but he said he couldn't just give up. I couldn't face myself if I gave up now. So this idea of giving up after you put in a lot of effort made me think of this statement from Rabbi Tarfon, who is a 2nd century rabbi, and this statement from the end of the 2nd chapter of Avot, which is I don't even know how to begin to describe Avot. It's got a really great collection of rabbinic statements. I did put in the 15th one here, but I think the 16th one is more pertinent, which is Rabbi Tarfon used to say, it is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. And so I think that line particularly really reflects what Cassian Andor has to say here, which is like, we got to keep trying. Like I'm not here to give up. We've already put in so much. Let's keep going. So even if we can't finish the job here, even if we can't single-handedly defeat the Empire, let's keep working at it. Can't give up now. Stephanie, yes?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie too. I love the pairing of the two of them. It's one of the reasons I love the movie is because she's really probably the strongest female character to me in all the movies, because she's like gonna do it herself. So, you know, it's great to have help, but she's gonna do it herself. But then the part you didn't put in, which is one of my favorite lines of hers, is while she's at that little argument about, whoa, this is a suicide, and she goes, rebellions are built on hope.
Yeah.
So it's cool because she was kind of like, whatever. I mean, there's a scene where she's talking to Saw Gerrera earlier where he's like, can you survive seeing the flag of the Empire? And she's like, it's not a problem if you don't look up. So at the beginning, she's kind of like, whatever. I got to do what I got to do. I'm going to survive. But then now we're here after she sees her father, and now she's saying exactly what Cassian said to her earlier. But then she walks away, and he's like, yeah, we knew they weren't going to believe you. But then now he's kind of come to her side, which is, all right, you know what? Let's just go do it ourselves. So it's cool because the two of them kind of come to the same, like she gives a little to his side, he gives a little to her side.
Yeah.
And then they just, decide like, this is what needs to happen. So yeah, this is one of my favorite scenes in that movie too.
That's great. I was thinking about putting that, her reflecting Cassian back up with the Cassian thing of, rebellions are built on hope. I mean, clearly she's been affected by seeing the biggest turnaround, the biggest shift for her was the holo reporting from her father. And that totally, that was just like a huge shift for her. And then I think seeing her father, that's just like, that cemented it. Like when she saw him die. So yeah.
And that goes right back to the work. Her father has put in this work. There is this exploitable weakness that he has created, But if they do nothing, then that work goes to waste. And so it's, again, a continuation of the work, but this time almost generational. Like she has to continue the father's work and everything.
That's good.
I also wanted to ask if there was anything, like what I really like about this scene, and you pointed out, is that gray area of it, that admission that like we are doing these dirty things in this cause, and without the good ends, there's no way we can try to justify those means that we had to do this. And I was wondering, like, what kind of text or scripture there is that kind of deals with that and some of that morally gray things when you have to do things in a greater cause. I don't know if you knew anything kind of off the top of your head or anything, but I was hoping something on that.
One thing that comes off the top of my head, in the Talmud, they talk about a mitzvah haba ba'avera, a mitzvah that comes about through doing a transgression. So how much is that really a thing? Like, can you really, like, if ultimately you're trying to accomplish a particular mitzvah, which is, like, that's great, but you have to do it, you get to it by doing an avera. It's, I can definitely.
You could just say, like, Pinchas is a great example, I feel like, of that. Like, he killed somebody, but God was like, good job, dude. You did a great thing. Like, I'll reward you for that.
Yeah, that's good.
I feel like that's a pretty gray area thing, and that was only last week.
Right. So, yeah, in the book of Numbers, as Jason mentioned, so there's the scene where there's this horrible plague that's taking out tens of thousands of the Israelites, and then Pinchas sees these two people consorting, one from the Israelites and one from the Midianites, and he takes the spear and he just, while they're mid-Congress, as it were, and he just shish kebabs them, and the plague stops. So that's something where, like, dude, like, they're doing something, but he interrupts them, spears them to death, and plague stopped. So, yeah. Thanks, Jason. Stevie, did you have something?
Just this morning, I was sort of going over the version of that scene that comes up in Psalm 106 has this word that's sort of ambiguous as to, like, and the Talmud actually translates it both ways, as either Pinchas prayed or that Pinchas acted in some sort of judgment capacity. And so so you get a lot of, especially in the Hasidic movement, a lot of interpretations that, like, yeah, he skewered them, but, like, he also prayed, and that's what solved the plague. Anyway, it's not really connected to Star Wars. It's just I had this conversation literally this morning. So
yeah, try and check it out. There we go. Verse 30. Vayamod Pinchas vayefalel v'teatzer hamegefa. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he stood up, and whatever this pilul was, whether it's praying or intervening.
Yeah. If you click on it on Sefaria and go to, like, the Talmuds, you'll see there's 6 quotes, one from the Yerushalmi and the other 5. So Brachot and Chulin, those 3 all say it means prayed, and Sanhedrin, both of those 2 say it means, like, acted.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Thanks for the heads up on that, Stevie.
But just, if you'd asked me yesterday, I wouldn't have like it.
It's good. We learn something new every day.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. So sending one whom trusts. Sending one whom one trusts. We have this really cool line here that, oh my God, what's his name? I am blanking. Leah's adopted father.
Baal?
What?
Baal
Organa.
Yeah, Baal Organa. Oh my God.
Jimmy
It's late on a
Smith.
Sunday evening. I should know this. Okay. Yeah, Senator Baal Organa says, I would trust her with my life. So he says, I know exactly who I should send in. Yes, I know a guy. How do we get word to him, this guy? Oh, I know someone. I'll trust her with my life. We know exactly who that is. And there's this Mishnah getting to 5 here as far as, and again, Mishnah, like published orally around the turn of the end of the second, going to the 3rd century. So Kasher and Lahavia. So this is in the context of bringing a divorce document, but basically all are qualified as far as being messengers, as being proxies, basically people who bring this stuff, and as long as they are not a deaf mute, an imbecile, a minor, a blind person, and here we also have a Gentile for a get. But basically, kids are okay. I did find something as far as minor children, as far as being a good, like a shaliach, a messenger, a proxy, but I know it's a question somewhere, like how cool is that? But I think Leah was 19 by the time. So she was no longer a minor, right? Okay. All right. And then we have this, may the force be with us. We have Jin Erso saying, may the force be with us before their raid on Scarif. And I found this, which is actually pretty on the nose, from 1 Kings 8:57. May the Lord our God be with us as he was with our fathers. May he never abandon nor forsake us. I thought that was just really straight and to the point. Of course, I mean, one of these texts came before the other. So it could be, you never know, the Rogue One writers could have said, oh, there's a biblical test. We can just, copy and paste. So I was thinking about that. Could be really nifty connection. Do you think there are any other scenes in the movie that I probably should have thrown in that had some sort of parallel? I just thought I'd throw that out there. I mean, I think this is a nice, decent selection of texts from the movie that have nice little biblical and rabbinic parallels. Any other thoughts? Stevie?
I'm thinking, but nothing yet.
Oh, okay. I saw you took yourself off of mute. So I'm like, oh, you got something. I mean, I was kind of thinking, I didn't know exactly what to do with it. Early on in the movie, it's on the Ring of Kafrine. This is where we're introduced to Cassian Andor. And he has this rebel informant, and he basically shoots him in the back. And I didn't exactly know what text to associate with that. I mean, I could have, there's an interesting little thing in the Talmud Bavli, in the Babylonian Talmud, about is someone's blood redder than yours, something along those lines. I could have, yeah, that's a tough one. Any other thoughts for scenes from this movie that we could have thrown in?
Well, towards the end,
Yeah.
and I'll say, I knew nothing about this movie when I first saw it, so I was extremely angry that they both died, like everybody died. It's just like, what the heck? So yeah, it was really weird that I just didn't happen to, because Daryl had seen it, but he hadn't told me about it, so I literally didn't know that they all died. So, but so maybe there has to be something parallel. I mean, I don't know the text, obviously, but there has to be something about sacrifice for the greater good. Because, I mean, you have to think they kind of knew they probably weren't making it out of there. Because she even says, like, we just keep going until the chances are spent at the beginning of once they land, but then, then they finally get there, they transmit the plans, but then they see the Death Star. They know that it doesn't matter if people could get through, they're not making it out of there. So it becomes, very much a sacrifice, but they know they've accomplished the mission, which is ultimately going to help the rebellion.
That's good.
I mean, something like martyrdom and stuff. I mean, we know that K2SO, like, he specifically martyred himself so that they could keep going. I kind of think that in the beginning, I can't remember her name, but Jen's mother probably knew. I mean, you pull a gun on a bunch of stormtroopers, that's probably where that's going too. So, like, I think that we have these, well, I wasn't necessarily wanting to die, but that's kind of, we know it's coming. But then you even have these specific examples of, I do know that this is death, and I am still choosing to go with it. So it seems all woven all throughout it. So I don't know you have for that, what text would match with that. But
Yeah, that's good. I don't have something off the top of my head, but that's good. I was also, oh, thank you, Allison. You're also going to say the same about K2SO and Sacrifice. Yeah. I was tempted also to throw in something else from the end of the movie, which was the very last line, which was when Princess Leia turns around and, like, obviously, if you're like me, you're like bawling the last few minutes of the movie. And she says, hope, which like goes back to sort of this, like, again, this, like, throughout the entire movie, this, like, theme of hope. And it even goes back, Daryl, to what you were saying is Leia Urso having hope that Jyn will get away and that she'll be able to, you know, not be taken along with Galen Urso. So hope is a huge, huge leitmotif of this movie, for sure. And hope and sacrifice. I mean, that's a lot of what these sacrifices are about. It's hoping that these, you know, the plans or the ideas of what ultimately will happen. Cool. Any other thoughts, comments? I mean, I think this was good. You like the GIFs? The GIFs are good. I'll try to find more of those. I had fun throwing those GIFs in. All right, so we only have 3 more left. Can you believe that? We have Last Jedi, Solo, and The Rise of Skywalker. So that should be some interesting stuff. And by the way, just this past weekend, over the last 5 days or something, Solo just hit Disney Plus. So you can watch all the Star Wars movies on Disney Plus now, apparently. It's just news. Alrighty.
I haven't seen it yet. I watched the first like 45 minutes of it.
Really?
I haven't finished it yet though. I started today.
Okay, well, it's on Disney Plus now.
Yeah, good to know, because I took a certain little someone, keeping in mind this came out like, what, 2 years ago? So he was 4 at the time, to the theater to go see it. Yeah, that didn't work really well.
Yeah. Stephanie, you had something?
I was just going to ask Jason what he thought of what the heck is it? Glover, I forget his first name, Glover, playing young Lando, because I mean, you know, the other guy's like, oh, you know, cool for Han Solo, whatever, but the guy that plays Lando is amazing.
Did you get to him? Because it's 45 minutes.
I don't know if I met Lando yet.
Yeah.
I've been pretty early into the movie.
Donald Glover.
I didn't even know he was in that.
It gets it. I almost said it. I think the beginning of the movie isn't the best part of the movie. Like, it's a little to get into. I think once you kind of get more into the middle, and especially when he shows up, when you have Lando, things get more exciting and great. And certainly hope you enjoy the end. For me, it's like the middle chunk of that movie is the best part of that movie. So yeah, I'm hoping. It sounded like you're probably not quite there yet, but it should get better.
I think like maybe he just met Chewbacca and they were just leaving that one planet or something. Like, that's probably exactly where I am.
Yeah.
It picks up, Jason. It picks up.
It will. All right. I mean, I'm going to continue watching it no matter what. So
I'm not saying it's a great Star Wars movie. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say it's a great Star Wars movie. It's just there to enjoy.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's just more like it's the fun movie. Like Rogue One is kind of Rogue One is hands down my favorite, but it's just more the sadness of what drives the rebellion and what the rebellion has really cost people. Whereas Solo's really just like, let's just watch Han Solo and, you know, see his exploits and of course, like I said, Donald Glover playing Lando. I can't think of anybody that would have been a better fit, because you'll see like he has the mannerisms, the suave, like the whole thing. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
It was a casting home run.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a casting home run. They hit the ball out of the park with the Lando casting. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, if anybody has anything else, feel free to send it my way. And I'm looking forward to Last Jedi with you next week. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And may the Force be with you. Always.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Absolutely.